Sir, step away from that glass. You tried to toast my funeral, boy?
Drink it, old man. Stop being dramatic.
Ungrateful snake.
You're done, old man. Sign or I'll take everything anyway.
You've never built a thing in your life, just schemes.
Stop playing hero. Hand over the company now.
Over my dead name. Say the number, $45 million, and say it belongs to me.
Earn it or shut your mouth.
He'll be in the ground before the ink dries. Sign.
Touch me again and you'll meet the law, not my patience.
You are treated as predeceased.
Read it again. You vicious fossil. I will rip that legacy from your hat.
You can't erase me. I'm your blood. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal.
Old man, you'll choke on your pride.
No, I'll live with it. You live with yours.
My son lifted his glass and told me to toast the $45 million I had worked for my whole life. But then I saw the security guard's face, pale as paper, and he leaned close to whisper. The words cut me deeper than any knife. My own blood had poured something deadly into my drink. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat in my penthouse that evening, the city lights spilling through the glass like broken stars. The quiet hum of Manhattan was supposed to comfort me, yet it only reminded me of how empty this space felt. 40 years of work had brought me here, from a drafty garage in Brooklyn to the top floor of a high-rise. But what did it matter now? All I could think about was the sound of my son's voice, the smug edge when he spoke of the future, as if it already belonged to him. My heart twisted as I remembered every sacrifice that had carried him to this point. I paid for his education when money was scarce, writing check after check to cover his tuition at NYU. $60,000, money that could have gone into the company, money that could have secured my retirement earlier. But I told myself he deserved the best. Later, when he graduated and failed to find steady work, I stepped in again. I bought him a car for $25,000, not just any car, but a reliable Honda Accord, because I thought he needed something dependable to get to interviews. And when his credit cards piled up with debt, I swallowed my pride and paid $10,000 to clean the slate. I told myself I was helping him start fresh. I told myself this was what fathers did. Now, sitting in the silence, I realized I hadn't given him a chance to build anything on his own. The company, Harrison Tech, was worth $45 million. It had become my life's masterpiece, my legacy carved in glass and code. To me, it was blood, sweat, and 1,000 nights bent over a keyboard. To David and Melissa, it was nothing more than a treasure chest waiting to be cracked open. They didn't see the sacrifices, they didn't remember the missed baseball games when David was a boy, me sitting in my office while other fathers cheered from the stands. They didn't feel the weight of the Christmas mornings when I stumbled home from the office, exhausted, too tired to even open gifts properly. All those choices had a cost, and it was written in the photos that lined the fireplace. Birthdays I missed, vacations we never took, Maggie smiling alone while she held the camera for pictures of just her and our son. When I first realized their plan to sell the company without me, to strip me from the very foundation I had built, it felt like someone had carved out my chest. I walked from room to room, stunned, trying to find something solid to hold on to. My world tilted on its axis. But as the hours passed, as the city outside moved on without me, I began to see it with painful clarity. They didn't want me. They didn't want my wisdom, my presence, my stories. They wanted the money. They wanted the $45 million like vultures circling a body they believed was already dead. The thought burned like fire. My grief slowly hardened into something sharper. A father's sorrow turned into a man's resolve. I leaned back into the couch and stared at the photograph of Maggie that still sat on the mantel. Her smile was warm, her eyes crinkled at the edges in a way that always made me feel safe. I whispered to her picture, barely trusting my own voice. Maggie, I did everything for him, for us, and now he wants it all. He wants me gone. The silence answered, heavy and suffocating. My chest ached as if she might answer back, but I knew she wouldn't. Still, speaking to her gave me strength. It reminded me that love and loyalty were once real in this home, even if betrayal now hung over it like smoke. I walked into my study, the one place in the apartment that still smelled faintly of cedar and old leather. The desk was covered in papers I hadn't touched for months, but I knew exactly what I was looking for. I pulled out the folder with the sales contract for Harrison Tech, still crisp, still waiting for my final signature. The numbers glared back at me, a reminder that every dollar had been earned through nights of sweat and days of sacrifice. I opened the drawer and found the bank statements, my retirement accounts, and the insurance policies. Each document was a shield, each signature a weapon if I chose to use it. My hand hovered over the phone, and for a moment I hesitated. Then I dialed. "Rick," I said when my lawyer answered. "It's Ed. We need to meet. Tonight." My voice was steady, but inside I could feel the tremor of anger, of hurt. He asked if everything was all right. I almost laughed. Nothing was all right, but I told him enough. Told him I wanted to review the documents, tighten control, and make sure nothing slipped through without my consent. He agreed to meet me the next day. That phone call felt like the first brick in a wall I was building to protect myself. The room grew darker as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the floor. I could hear the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner, each second falling like a hammer. Time was running, but for once, I wasn't afraid of it. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by everything I had built: glass walls, polished floors, furniture chosen by Maggie when she was alive. It should have felt like home, but it felt like a museum of a life that had already passed. My fingers traced the edge of the photo frame on the mantel, our wedding picture from 40 years ago. Her veil, my nervous smile. We were just kids then. We thought love and hard work would be enough. We never imagined that betrayal could come from our own child. I sank into the chair near the window, staring out at the glow of the city. Anger coursed through me, but it wasn't wild anymore. It was focused. They had underestimated me. They thought my age made me weak, that my grief over Maggie made me blind. They thought they could circle and strike without me noticing. But I saw them now, clearer than ever. And I knew I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The last light of the evening caught the crystal decanter on the table, reflecting a sharp glint onto the wall. It looked almost like a blade, and for a moment I imagined it cutting through the lies that had wrapped around me. I leaned forward, speaking into the empty room, but also to myself. They think I'm finished. They think I won't fight. But they've forgotten who built all of this. They've forgotten who I am. I opened the drawer again and pulled out one more envelope, the insurance papers Maggie and I had signed years ago. Her name, my name, written in bold letters. A reminder of promises once made and still binding. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it, knowing it could be the key to everything. The decision settled inside me like stone. As the city darkened and the penthouse filled with shadows, I knew Chapter 2 of this story was ending. The shock was gone, the grief hardened into resolve. I had the papers, I had the lawyer, I had the will to fight. Tomorrow it would begin. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I woke up before dawn and watched the first light crawl across the glass of my living room. The city was still quiet, just a few headlights moving like slow fireflies along the park. I stood there a long time, coffee cooling in my hands, and felt something in me click into place. Last night, grief held the steering wheel. This morning, I did. I put the cup down, picked up my phone, and dialed Rick. My voice came out even. I told him I wanted to review every lock, every hinge, every line in every document tied to my name. He didn't ask why. He never needed the story to do his job. He just said, "Come in by 9," and that was that. I felt the floor under my feet again. I showered, shaved, and put on the navy suit Maggie loved. She used to say that suit made me look like a man who finished what he started. I buttoned the jacket and looked at myself in the mirror. The lines around my eyes were deeper than last year. The hair was whiter. None of it bothered me. Time is honest, at least. What stung was knowing my own son had treated my years like an obstacle, not a gift. I slipped my phone into my inside pocket along with a slim leather notebook and left the penthouse just as the elevator bell chimed. Rick's office sat on a high floor with old wood and wide windows. He kept a bowl of peppermints on the credenza and a framed photo of his first courthouse win behind his desk. It always smelled faintly of paper and confidence. He closed the door after I walked in and didn't waste time. I told him I wanted my personal accounts placed under new controls immediately. No wires over 10,000 without my direct approval, no changes in beneficiaries, no new signers, two-factor on everything, alerts to my phone and his. I asked him to file interim notices with the bank and to fax letters of instruction before lunch. He nodded as he wrote, steady, calm. He had done this dance with scared families and greedy relatives for 3 decades. He understood the rhythm. We moved to the company next. Harrison Tech was worth $45 million, and that number had pulled predators from the dark like a porch light pulls moths. I told him my decision was final. I would sell to Tom Bradley. We had circled each other for years, sometimes competitors, sometimes allies. Tom understood software, understood teams, and paid his bills on time. Most of all, he respected clean code and clean exits. Rick skimmed the letter of intent already sitting in my folder and slid me a pen. "We'll tighten this," he said. "Transition comp for key staff, escrow terms, reps, and warranties. You keep control until signing day. Nobody touches the bank accounts but you." I initialed where he placed flags and signed his engagement scope for the sale. The pen scratched across the paper with a sound that felt like a door shutting softly. We called the bank next. Rick put the call on speaker, and I listened to my private banker recite balances and features as if reading a grocery list. I asked for immediate freezes on 2 old sub-accounts I no longer use, and I ordered new authentication on the rest. We added a voice code they didn't know. We required an in-person ID for any change requests. When the bank officer hesitated, Rick leaned in and said the words that oil every rusty hinge in finance: estate risk and litigation hold. The hesitation vanished. I ended the call with a confirmation number written in block letters in my notebook and the feeling of air returning to my lungs. Before I left, Rick looked at me over his glasses. He asked one question, gentle but direct. "Do you want personal security for a while?" I let the silence sit. I didn't want to admit I had even considered it. Then I told him no, not yet. But I asked him to text me the number of a discreet firm, just in case. He did, and I saved the contact. I didn't know it yet, but that small act would steady my hands later. On the way to the elevator, I paused in the hallway and pulled out my phone again. I called Tom Bradley. His voice came through bright and purposeful, the way it always did when he smelled a deal. We didn't talk about sentiment. We talked about the process. Diligence this week. Drafts by Monday, signing on Wednesday if legal cleared. He praised my team and asked about retention packages. I told him I wanted them protected. He agreed. When we hung up, I stared at my phone for a long second. 45 million, a clean exit, a chance to breathe. And then something in me said quietly, "Be careful who you tell." I knew I had to go home, not to rest, to face the music in my own living room. I sent David a short text. "Come by at 4. We need to talk." Melissa would come with him. She came to everything where money might be discussed. The city felt sharper that afternoon, as if the buildings had been drawn with a fresh pencil. I stopped 3 blocks from the park and bought a small pharmacy bag, just something I had been meaning to replace for months. Old habits, old pills, an old man's quiet insurance. I put the small brown bag in my jacket pocket and walked the rest of the way under the trees. They were already in the lobby when I arrived. David pacing, Melissa poised on a leather chair like a cat who knew it owned the room. We rode the elevator together. No one spoke. In the apartment, I let them take the sofa while I stood by the window. I wanted the light behind me and the city at my back. It helped me keep my voice level. I said it plainly. I had engaged counsel. I had strengthened the accounts. The sale to Tom Bradley would proceed on my timeline, under my terms. David's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came. When it came hot. He said I was destroying his future. He said the company was family. He said I owed him at least a say, at least a chance. His hands cut the air. Melissa, quiet at first, pretended to take notes on a small pad, but every so often she glanced up with eyes that did not blink. I kept my hands folded. I told David this. The company was never his to lose. He had never led a product cycle. He had never sat on a server room floor at 2 a.m. with a flashlight and a line of broken code. He had never called a client at Christmas to apologize and deploy a patch from the back of a minivan. I told him some futures are earned, not inherited. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The truth has its own volume. He shouted that I was being cruel. He said I was 80% of the way to the grave and should be glad someone still wanted to carry the torch. Melissa tried to soften it with a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. She said maybe a manager, maybe a slow handoff, maybe a way to keep the name in the family. I felt a thin, cold thread run behind my ribs and up my spine. I asked David a question I had avoided for years. Could he list the core modules of our accounting engine? Just the headers. He stared at me like I had asked him to recite a foreign alphabet. The silence did the talking. I nodded once, not unkindly. That was the point. I told him the sale would protect employees, protect clients, and protect me. He said the number out loud as if he could catch it in the air. 45 million. He tasted the words and hated the taste of them not being his. I could see it on his face. Melissa shifted in her seat. She closed the little notebook and slipped it into her purse like a secret. She asked one question, casual as sunlight. When would we celebrate? She said we should mark the moment as a family, that a nice dinner might cool tempers. David shot me a glance that tried to be warm. He said it'd be good for all of us. I told them to meet me at Bella Vista tomorrow at 8. Terrace, if the weather held. Melissa clapped her hands once, softly. She said she knew the maitre d'. Of course she did. After they left, the room felt bigger, and not in a pleasant way. I picked up the framed photo on the mantel and looked at it until my eyes burned. Maggie stood in a summer dress, a breeze catching her hair on the cape, long before the weight of the company bent my back. I whispered to her again, this time with a steadier voice. They think I'm old, I said. They think I'm blind. They think the game is theirs. I paused and let the words settle. Then I said the thing I needed to hear out loud. They are wrong. The next morning moved like a chess clock. I met Rick again at 10 and signed letters of direction we had drafted overnight. We updated the board minutes to reflect my sole authority to negotiate the sale. I filed a memo to staff, brief but respectful, telling them a change of ownership was in process, that jobs would be protected, and that nothing had changed in service. I scheduled a stand-up with my lead engineer to walk through transition notes and ensure the documentation was bulletproof. I asked HR to prepare severance terms for non-technical staff who might be cut by the buyer. The numbers went into a spreadsheet with dates and columns and neat cells. This was not joy. This was duty. Duty has a clean taste when you have been living on the bitter stuff. Around noon, I called Tom again. We finalized the timeline. Diligence started that afternoon. He will bring his CTO by tomorrow to tour the codebase. I made sure the tour would be thorough but controlled. No repository access beyond read-only, no exports, no snapshotting. If they wanted a peek, they would get a peek, not a copy. Tom respected that. He had been on the other side. He knew how it felt to have your life's work treated like free candy on a reception desk. At 3, I walked to the bank branch in person, not the flagship. A smaller one on a side street with a manager who had worked there for 20 years and once called me on a Sunday when the ATM ate my card. I handed her the letters Rick drafted, and we sat in her glass office while she entered flags into the system. She turned the screen so I could read. No outgoing wires beyond set thresholds. No cashier's checks over $5,000 without presence. beneficiary locks, dual approval on anything that smelled like an attempt to tilt the table. The manager was careful and kind. She printed confirmations while the printer spat warm paper into the tray. When I left, I shook her hand and said, "Thank you, the way you say it when you mean it." On the way back, a drizzle started. The sidewalks darkened, and traffic hissed like a sleeping animal. I ducked into a pharmacy, the same chain as yesterday, and stood in the aisle longer than a man should. I bought small things an older man might buy without raising an eyebrow. Aspirin, breath mints, and a discreet empty plastic travel bottle from the toiletries rack, the kind meant for shampoo when you fly. It looked like nothing. It would fit in a jacket pocket. It would hold 2 ounces of whatever needed holding. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then I remembered what paranoia is sometimes called when it saves your life. Preparation. I spent the late afternoon at home writing names and phone numbers on a yellow pad. People to protect if anything went sideways. People to call if I didn't show up where I said I would be. I took a shower and dressed slowly. Navy suit again. Fresh shirt, a tie Maggie had picked for me on our 20th anniversary, deep silver with a soft thread that caught the light. I put the small travel bottle in my inside pocket next to my old pill vial. I held the pill vial in my palm for a count of 5. It had ridden in my pocket for years, through flights and weddings and funerals. Tonight it had a different job. The thought made my mouth go dry. I drank water and told myself to breathe. The maitre d' greeted me by name and led me to the terrace. The city glittered like a spilled jewelry box. A jazz quartet murmured by the bar. Couples swayed by the railing as if the night itself were a slow song. I chose the chair with the widest view and placed my napkin in my lap. A waiter poured water. I asked for orange juice, cold, with ice. It was a small, stubborn choice, the kind you make to remind yourself that your throat and your will still belong to you. David and Melissa arrived hand in hand. He looked past me at the skyline before he looked at me at all. She kissed my cheek as if pressing a stamp onto an envelope. I smelled expensive perfume, sharp and clean. We ordered. Melissa guided the menu with a polished finger. She suggested the ossobuco. She ordered the risotto. David asked for a steak and then changed his mind because she shook her head. They talked about nothing for a while. Weather. A friend of hers who had moved to Miami. The new gym in their building. Their smiles were perfect. Their eyes were elsewhere. I answered politely and let the conversation drift until the band slid into a familiar standard and Melissa lifted her chin. She looked at me across the candle and asked about my travel list. Japan, she said. Italy. Paris. She said the names were like flavors she had sampled and found unremarkable. I told her Japan first. I told her about the old temples in Kyoto, the silence of the gardens, and the way cherry blossoms fall like snow if you stand there long enough. She smiled, and then she did it. She tilted her head and let pity drip into her voice. She said she hoped I had enough time. She said men my age sometimes don't. David snorted a laugh, and he tried to swallow. He said we should do it quickly then. He said time runs faster when the calendar gets short. I looked at them both. I let the silence hang. I watched Melissa set her fork down with care, watched her mouth shape a soft, polished apology that never came. Something inside me went very still. Cruelty has a weight. It sits on the table like a heavy glass you can't move. I folded my hands and said only, "We'll see." I said it gently. Said. My voice did not crack. The band kept playing. Somewhere behind me, a waiter struck a match. It should have ruined my appetite. It didn't. It purified it. I tasted everything. The salt on the salad. The sweetness of the orange slice sits on the rim of my glass, the steel of the knife in my hand. I watched David's eyes flicker toward my drink and then away. I watched Melissa touch his wrist when she thought I wasn't looking. I watched the quartet nod to each other and slide from one song into the next like a river turning. Halfway through the meal, she suggested a dance. David hesitated. I told them to go. I wanted to see them move in the soft light. I wanted to see what they were when they thought no one saw them. They walked to the small floor and fit together quickly, like two pieces from a set. He kept glancing at the table. She whispered something close to his ear. He nodded once, twice. I sipped my water and set the orange juice to my right. I moved it 2 inches closer to the candle. The light made the ice glow. They came back flushed and smiling. Melissa reached for her napkin and said the band was lovely. David picked up his wine. He mentioned the number again, the 45 million, as if it were an old friend who might sit down at any moment. I told him some numbers are better left unspoken at dinner. He said he was only proud of me. I nodded and kept my eyes on his face. Pride has a certain warmth. He didn't. Dessert came and went. Coffee came and went. The night moved the way good nights do, slow at first and then suddenly quick. They said we should do this more often. They said family matters. They said maybe I should start calling them more. Their words were soft. Their tone was rehearsed. I thought of Maggie's hand on my arm years ago after some work dinner when she told me we would never be people who used phrases like reach out and touch base at home. We would speak plainly. We would say what we meant. She would have heard the hollowness tonight 10 tables away. When the check arrived, I placed my card on top and leaned back. I looked straight at David and felt the strange calm that sometimes lands on a man just before the storm he knows is coming. My voice surprised me with how light it sounded. I told them we would meet again soon. I told them I had paperwork to finish in the morning. I told them I had a meeting set with Tom Bradley's team and that things were moving. Melissa smiled as if she had accomplished something private. David lifted his glass and told me again he was proud. It didn't land anywhere in the room. It just floated up and away like a cheap balloon. They stood to dance once more. As they turned away, I slid my hand into my jacket and felt the smooth plastic of the travel bottle. I took a slow breath and let my fingers rest there for 1 beat, 2 beats, until my pulse steadied. I was not a paranoid old man. I was a cautious one. There is a difference. There. I adjusted the bottle so the cap would unscrew easily. Then I placed both hands on the table and watched my son sway under the lights with the woman who had learned to smile without her eyes. They came back and I told them I was calling it a night. I left cash for the band and thanked the waiter by name. I walked to the door and felt the weight of the small bottle in my pocket and the weight of something else in my chest, something not heavy with fear anymore, but with clarity. Outside, the air was cooler. The street smelled like rain and basil. I stood under the awning and checked my watch. It wasn't late. It felt late. Back home, I loosened my tie and placed it carefully on the dresser. I took off my jacket and set it on the chair, then picked it up again and took out the small bottle, unscrewed the cap, and tightened it once more so I could do it in the dark if I had to. I set it next to the old pill vial on the dresser and looked at the two of them for a long time. One held years of habit. The other held something like a plan. I said it out loud to the empty room so the walls would hear me and bear witness. They think I'm sitting still. I paused and let the words find their weight. Then I finished the sentence, but I'm rewriting the rules. I put both bottles back into my jacket and sat on the edge of the bed. The grandfather clock down the hall ticked with a soft, deliberate heart. The city hummed. Somewhere a siren rose and fell. I folded my hands and stared at the carpet until the pattern blurred. The anger from yesterday had burned down to a coal, steady and hot. I was not a man drowning in hurt anymore. I was a man swimming toward shore, one slow stroke at a time. I picked up my phone and sent Rick a simple message. "Keep your phone on in the morning." He replied with a thumbs up and 3 words. "I'm with you." I wrote the name of a lab on my pad, one he had mentioned once in passing, just in case. I didn't need it yet, but I wrote it anyway. I set the pad on the nightstand, next to my glasses and a photo of Maggie in the garden. I touched the edge of the frame. "They think I've lost," I whispered to her, "but the game just started." The room was quiet except for the clock. I lay back and let my eyes close. Tomorrow would be another day of signatures and calls and careful smiles. Tomorrow would be another day of holding my ground. Somewhere on that path, I knew, a crack would appear in the mask my son wore. Somewhere on that path, a truth would step into the light, and when it did, I would be ready to catch it, to hold it up, and to show it to whoever needed to see. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. The terrace lights trembled in the breeze, and the jazz drifted like smoke. I had just set my glass of orange juice down when the man in the dark suit stepped into my light. He leaned close, eyes level with mine, voice barely above the music. "Sir, I am John Carter, security. I saw your son pour something into your glass." The words did not land all at once. They sank, slow, like a stone going down through deep water. My chest tightened. For a heartbeat, I could not breathe. I heard the clink of ice in the glass. I heard the quartet change keys. Nothing else moved. "Are you sure?" I asked. It came out steady, the way you ask a doctor to say it again, to make sure you heard right. He did not blink. I saw it, clear as day. He shielded the rim with his hand. He looked at you. Then he put the small vial back in his jacket. I nodded once. I could taste metal in my mouth. I thanked him, and he stepped back to his place by the rail like a shadow returning to the wall. I looked at the orange juice. It looked harmless, sunny, ordinary. It looked like a smile you have loved for years. On the dance floor, David held Melissa close, and the small smile on his face looked practiced. I slid my hand into my jacket. My fingers found the smooth plastic bottle I had bought that afternoon. I unscrewed the cap with the slow care of a man diffusing his own memory. With my other hand, I took my old pill vial from the pocket where it had ridden for years. My hands knew the motion. My stomach did not. The music swelled. I tilted the glass and let a portion of the juice slide into the travel bottle. I capped it. I slid the rest into the pill vial. I put both away, one in the inside pocket, one under the lining I had cut long ago when I used to carry spare keys. Then I lifted the glass, studied the candlelight breaking in the ice, and watered the potted plant by my chair. The soil darkened, then went still. They came back to the table glowing from the dance. Melissa reached for her napkin. David looked at my glass as if checking the weather. It was empty. I smiled at him the way a father smiles when he is not ready to speak. He asked lightly, "All done?" I said, "All done." The words felt like a closed door. We ordered dessert, which we did not eat. I told them I had an early morning with Tom Bradley's team, that I was calling it a night. Melissa tilted her head and gave me that polished, camera-ready look. "We should celebrate big soon, Ed, family style." I stood, set cash under the bill, and kissed the air near her cheek. I shook David's hand and held it a second longer than custom allows. His pulse jumped. "Good night, son," I said. He swallowed. "Night, Dad." My hand felt very steady when I let go. I walked toward the foyer as if to make a call. I did make a call. Then I stopped behind the column at the edge of the terrace just outside their sight line. The music softened. Their voices did not. Melissa's whisper had an edge to it. "Tonight it ends. You heard him. The deal is moving. We cannot wait." Feet. David exhaled through his nose, a tight sound I knew from childhood when he lied about broken windows. "It is fine," he said. "It is already done. Money first, then we can breathe." My knees went cold. That was the second blade. The first was what John told me. This was the twist of the wrist. It was planned. It was shared. It was not a moment of madness. It was a map they had drawn together. Outside, the night air felt cleaner than the air inside. I walked through the park with my hands in my pockets and kept my pace even. My phone rang. David's name lit the screen. I let it go 3 beats before I answered. His voice wore concern like a borrowed jacket. "Dad, you left fast. Are you feeling okay?" I could hear the line stretch while he listened for a cough, for a slur, for the sound of a man falling. Just tired, I said. Long day. I am home now. He paused. Maybe call your doctor just in case. The suggestion was syrupy and cold. I will be fine in the morning, I said. Sleep will do. I hung up and stood in my living room with the city burning across the glass. I set both bottles on my desk. The small one looked like nothing. The old pill vial looked like a habit. Both held more than liquid. They held my life turning. The next morning at 8:15, I walked into a private lab 2 blocks from the park, the kind that never lists its clients and never misspells a name. The receptionist used first names as if we were old friends at church. They guided me to a quiet room where a chemist with calm hands took the bottles and labeled each one in neat black letters. The chain of custody started with my signature. They recorded the time. They asked how the sample had been stored. I told them. They nodded. The chemist explained the steps. A rapid screen first, then gas chromatography and mass spectrometry for confirmation. The words were long and precise. It felt like someone was putting planks under my feet where the ground had given way. I did not wait in the lobby. I walked 2 streets over to Rick's office and sat in the same chair as yesterday. He looked at my face for a quiet second and then reached for a file that already had my name on it. We moved quickly. First, the will. He slid a printed draft across the desk, the paper thick enough to make a sound when it landed. He had added a no-contest clause. He had added a clause that removed any heir who attempted to harm me from the line of succession and treated them as if they had predeceased me. He had tightened the charitable trust language so every dime of the sale could move cleanly to the foundation we had discussed for years. Medical research. Scholarships for kids who write code at kitchen tables in small apartments. I read every line. I initialed every page. I signed my name with a pen that felt heavier than usual. A notary came in and watched me write. She stamped the seal like a judge's gavel. Then the living trust. Then the power of attorney is limited to my signature only. Then the healthcare proxy, refreshed and clean. By the time we finished, the folder held more weight than when I had carried in the samples. Rick closed it and sat back. "This is the hard part," he said, "but it is also the clean part." I let my breath out slowly. "They think I am weak," I said. "They will learn." He did not argue. He slid a business card across the desk, the discreet security firm he had mentioned yesterday. "If you change your mind," I put it in my wallet. "If," I said. The word felt less stubborn today. It felt practical. At 10:40 a.m., the lab called. The voice was clinical but not cold. The preliminary screen had lit positive for cyanide. The word did not shout. It rang. They said they needed several more hours for the full analysis. They asked if I wanted to come in to review the preliminary notes. I said yes. I said I was on my way. Rick stood when I did. "Do you want me there?" he asked. I thought of Maggie. I thought of what a father should do alone and what he should not. "Come," I said. "You should see this with me." The lab room smelled faintly of alcohol and something sweet that reminded me of a dentist's office. A printout lay on the table, still warm at the edges. The chemist spoke slowly so we could hear each word. The strip test had shown a color change consistent with free cyanide. A spectrophotometric method had confirmed the presence at a concentration that would be lethal if an average adult consumed the contents of the glass. Later, the GCMS would identify and quantify with precision. She showed me the small graph, the spike rising like a nail through the silence. She explained the chain of custody again, how the sealed sample would move from one locked hand to another. "This is not just a hunch," she said. "This is a finding." I thanked her not with the stiff politeness people use in offices, but with the gratitude a man uses when someone points to the door out of a burning room. Out on the sidewalk, the light looked different. It had a clean edge to it. The grief that had pressed on my ribs since last night did not vanish, but it stepped back. In the cab, Rick spoke in the same tone he used for court calendars. "We file nothing yet," he said. "We finish the test. We tighten the locks. We prepare the letters. We keep our voices low." I nodded. "Call the bank again," I said. "Place additional alerts. If any change is attempted, I want my phone to ring." He made the call right there, in the back seat, and the bank noted the alert while the cab turned onto Madison. By noon, the panic began. Not mine, David's. He called and launched into small talk that lasted exactly 30 seconds. Then he asked if I had received a notification from the bank. I told him I had. He said it must be a glitch. He said he had set up an automatic transfer to cover a home project, a phrase he chewed like gristle. I told him the freezes were intentional. He laughed, a thin sound that broke at the edges. "Dad, this is ridiculous," he said. "We are family." I let the word sit. Family. Then I answered evenly. "We are," I said. "That is why you will respect my boundaries." He did not like that word. Boundaries. He repeated it as if it were foreign. He raised his voice. He reminded me of his plans. He reminded me that Melissa had arranged something special for us. I told him to rest. I told him we would talk soon. I ended the call while he was still assembling a new argument. My hand did not shake. The lab finished the full report just after 4. GCMS confirmed potassium cyanide. The concentration fell within a range that matched a lethal dose in a typical 8-ounce serving for a man my size. The document was specific, unemotional, devastating. It included the chain of custody record with times and signatures. It included a paragraph on method validation. It included a statement fit for court. I held the report like a stone. Rick asked for 2 certified copies. The chemist brought them in a manila envelope with their seal across the flap. I signed the receipt. We thanked them again. Then we walked out into a city that kept moving like nothing had changed, while everything had changed. We went straight to Rick's office. He drafted a letter with a firmness that didn't brag. It stated that my will had been changed. It stated that any heir who harmed or attempted to harm me would receive nothing. It stated that my estate would pass to a charitable foundation. It attached the lab's preliminary findings to the certification. It did not accuse. It documented. In a second envelope, he drafted instructions to my bank to flag any activity related to David or Melissa as potential fraud and to notify our office immediately. He attached the prior confirmations. He stamped both with his own hands and placed them to the side like a pilot checking off instruments. I did one more thing before the sun fell. I called the restaurant. I asked for the terrace table for tomorrow evening at 8. I asked to speak to the manager and the head of security. I asked if they could kindly leave the potted plant by my table undisturbed until then. My voice was calm. The manager said yes, softly, the way people answer when they feel they are touching a bruise. I thanked him. I said I would be on time. When I got home, the penthouse looked like a stage after the actors have left. The chairs sat with their backs to each other. The blinds held the last stripe of light like a breath. I put the sealed envelope from the lab in the safe with my passport and 2 old coins Maggie used to carry in her pocket for luck. I laid the new will beside it. Paper does not look like power until it does. I closed the door of the safe and spun the wheel. The sound slid through the room like a blade into a sheath. David called twice around dinner. I let the first ring out. I picked up the second. He sounded tight, controlled. He wanted to know if I was feeling any symptoms. He wanted to know if I had eaten since we left. He wanted to know if I had taken any medication. He wanted details you only want when you have released a tiger and are listening for the scream. I told him the same thing I told him the night before. "I am fine," I said. "Sleep helps." He tried a new tactic. He said he needed to borrow a little until the sale cleared. He said $20,000 would cover a contractor. He said the bank would not process the transfer for some reason. I imagined the alert flashing on a screen in a windowless back room. I told him to send me an email. He asked if we could just do it now. I told him to send me an email. Then I said good night. The silence on the line tasted like tin. Around 9, I poured a club soda and stood by the window where the city cut itself into lines of light. My reflection looked older than yesterday and also less tired. I said Maggie's name out loud and let it sit. "They tried," I said. "They tried to make me disappear with a smile on my face, but I am still here." The clock down the hall ticked once for each second. Somewhere far below, a car horn tapped twice like a question and an answer. I held the glass in both hands and let the cold find my palms. Sleep did not come easily. It came in pieces. When it finally settled, it was the heavy sleep of a man who has put his name on paper and has nothing more to give the day. Morning arrived like a kind guest. I woke early. I ate toast with butter and drank coffee at the small kitchen table Maggie used to cover with flowers when she was feeling mischievous. I checked my phone. 2 messages from Rick, copies filed. Notices logged. 1 message from the lab, a simple confirmation that the full report was ready for pickup again if needed. 3 from David, his words growing tighter, shorter, as night became day. I answered none. At 10, I walked to the florist down the block and bought a single white lily. On the way back, I stopped by the front desk and asked the doorman to call me a car for the evening. He wrote it down in careful block letters, as if the act of writing might protect me. I went upstairs and set the lily in a glass by the kitchen sink. I watched it open by degrees, patient, certain, like the slow release of a truth you cannot hide forever. The afternoon moved cleanly. I met Tom's CTO and walked him through the codebase in our conference room, read only, eyes on the page, no copies. He asked good questions. He nodded at clean functions, clear comments, and the old decisions that aged well. I told him my team would be treated fairly. He agreed with a nod. A good engineer gives another man who has carried weight he can measure. At 4, the phone rang again. Melissa this time. Her voice came bright and gentle, like a person hosting a show on daytime television. She said they were excited about tonight. She said the family should celebrate wins. She said she had a surprise reservation in case the terrace was full. I told her that it would not be necessary. I told her I had already arranged everything. She hesitated the smallest fraction of a second. Then she said, "Perfect." That was the moment I knew she had felt the wall. It was not visible yet, but she had put her hand out and found the brick. I arrived at the restaurant early. The manager greeted me with a gravity usually reserved for funerals and weddings. He led me to the same table. The plant sat by my chair, its soil still dark in one corner, the top leaves a little less green than yesterday. The city stretched beyond the rail. The quartet tuned their instruments. I placed an envelope on the plate in front of my chair. Another stayed in my inside pocket. My hands were steady. My mouth was dry. I drank water and watched the door. They were late by 3 minutes. It felt like 30. David scanned the room without looking at me first. Melissa smoothed her dress, checked her phone, then slid it into her purse. They kissed my cheeks. I sat. They sat. The candle flickered. The waiter poured water. Melissa did her easy hostess voice and reached for the wine list. I let her finish the sentence she always used to show she was in charge of a room. Then I set my hand on the envelope and pulled it closer. "I have something for you," I said. My tone was the tone I used to use when I would hand David his report card and a milkshake on the same day. He smiled reflexively. He took the envelope. He broke the seal. The paper whispered. His eyes moved left to right, left to right. The color left his face in stages. Melissa watched his eyes first, then the page. Her mouth tightened as if she had bitten a lemon. She reached for the paper and read the same lines he had just read. The new will, the no contest clause, the charitable trust, the phrase, treated as predeceased, the lab's header, the words potassium cyanide, the word lethal, the line chain of custody. David looked up like a swimmer who had run into a wall he did not see in a clear pool. "This is insane," he said. He tried to laugh and could not find the sound. He said I must be mistaken, that the lab must be wrong, that John must have missen. He said the drink had been yours, then he could not find the end of the sentence. Melissa reached for her tone, the one that could sell ice in winter. She told me I must be confused. She said I looked tired. She said the stress of the sale had gotten to me. She said we should slow down, talk at home, and avoid upsetting anyone in public. I looked at her and felt a strange pity. We are not at home, I said. We are in the light. My voice did not rise. It did not need to. He reached across as if to take the envelope back. I kept my hand on it. The waiter approached and then withdrew, the way a man does when he sees a dog baring its teeth behind a fence. David's voice rose. He said the money would be wasted on strangers. He said I was destroying our name. He said I was cruel. He forgot to say I was loved. He forgot to say he was sorry. Melissa's hands stayed folded until they did not. Then she pressed her palm flat on the table and leaned in. Think about what you're doing, she said. Think about your legacy. I thought of Maggie. I thought of White Lily's opening. I thought of the guard's eyes steady as a level. I am, I said. That is why I am doing it. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the room came back into focus. A glass clinked 3 tables over. The saxophone found the note the pianist had left for it. Outside, a cab horn stitched a thread through the night traffic. David sank back in his chair and stared at the candle, then at me. You will regret this, he said. The words had no weight. They slid off the table and fell to the floor. No, I said, and my voice felt like a hand closing a latch. I will not. He looked like a boy again for half a second, the boy who used to hide his report card in his backpack and tell me the teacher had not given them out yet. Then the second passed. He became a man with empty hands. I stood. The envelope stayed with me. I slid the second envelope from my pocket and placed it under my napkin. It contained nothing more than a copy of the new will, because some truths deserved to be left like a calling card. I thanked the manager with a nod that carried more meaning than words could. I thanked the quartet by dropping a folded bill into their jar. Then I walked out into the cool night air where the lights did not care who had tried to do what to whom. The city does not take sides, it just keeps breathing. On the sidewalk, I felt the small shake in my hands that had not shown itself inside. I took one slow breath and then another. My phone buzzed. Rick's name. I answered. He asked if I was all right. I told him yes. He asked if the letters had been delivered. I told him they had. He said he would file the notice of updated instruments first thing in the morning and record the trust documents at the opening bell. He said, "Sleep if you can." I thanked him. I put the phone away. A block from the restaurant, my phone buzzed again. A bank alert. Attempted login on a frozen sub-account. Blocked. A second alert. Attempted beneficiary change request. Flagged. The third did not come. I kept walking. Above me, an apartment window glowed gold. A woman set a vase on a table and stepped back to see if it looked right. It did. Some evenings are ordinary in the best possible way. Mine would be again, not tonight, but soon. Back at the penthouse, I set the lily on the mantel beside Maggie's photo and told her what had happened. I did not dress it up. I did not weep. I said the words as if I were telling her the weather. They tried, I said. They planned it. They spoke it out loud. They will carry the sound of their own voices for the rest of their lives. I touched the glass of her frame. I felt the cool edge and the warm memory. They think I was weak, I said softly. They can live with the truth now. I turned off the lights and let the city shine for both of us. This was the turn, not loud, not showy. It was the sound of keys turning in locks, of papers signed, of a man stepping out from under a shadow he did not make. Their plan had not just failed. It had broken against the quiet edge of my resolve, against the science that does not care who cries, against the law that sits where you put it if you put it there the right way. Tonight would end with them looking at each other and seeing at last the truth of what they had become. It would end with me standing by my own window, whole. The next chapter would bring the rest, the quiet after, the choices that follow the thunder. It would bring whatever peace a man can earn after fire. I poured a final glass of water and sipped it standing, the way you do in kitchens when you are alone and safe. I looked out at the park, dark and generous. I was very tired. I was not afraid. I had done what I could with the day given to me. Tomorrow I would ask for another kind of courage. I would have it ready. Feeling dismissed and used is heavy, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves justice and to be seen, comment the keyword justice. Now watch what they will do to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The night after, Bella Vista still lived in my chest like the echo of a storm. The report from the lab had confirmed what John Carter's eyes already told me. Cyanide, not suspicion, not paranoia. Hard science written in black ink, signed, sealed, fit for court. And when I slid that envelope across the table, when David's face drained of color as he read the words, "You are treated as predeceased," the weight of 40 years of sacrifice and silence finally lifted off my shoulders. He stammered, Melissa clutched his arm and whispered excuses, but the truth stood taller than either of them. My will was rewritten. Harrison Tech, the company I built from nothing but lines of code in a Brooklyn garage, now belonged not to their greed, but to a foundation that would live longer than all of us. $45 million dedicated to medical research and scholarships, a legacy written in hope instead of betrayal. I left the restaurant that night with their voices snapping behind me like branches in a fire. David's words had turned to shouts. Melissa's tone had turned shrill, desperate. "You can't do this," he had yelled, and my answer had been steady, almost gentle. "I didn't do this, son. You did." That truth burned hotter than any curse I could have thrown at him. When I stepped out into the New York night, the air felt lighter. For the first time in years, I was not carrying them on my back. The following days were filled with movement, the kind that signals a new chapter. Rick called me every morning with updates. The foundation papers were filed, the charitable trust recorded, and the bank accounts retitled. Each confirmation email felt like a brick slid into place on a wall between me and their grasping hands. The penthouse, once a symbol of achievement, had become a mausoleum of arguments and memories. I decided to sell it. Within weeks, a buyer offered close to market value. I signed the papers without hesitation. $600,000 from the sale of the apartment joined the trust, another piece of armor around my legacy. The day I handed over the keys, I walked through each room one last time. I touched the frame where Maggie's photograph had always rested, and I whispered, "We are done here, love. Time to breathe somewhere new." The new place was smaller, a 2-bedroom apartment overlooking Central Park. The building wasn't grand, but the view was priceless. Green stretching wide under the skyline, kids flying kites, couples walking hand in hand. I furnished it simply, with light wood floors, a soft gray couch, bookshelves that smelled of fresh pine. On the first morning, I made coffee and carried it to the balcony. The park was waking, joggers moving in rhythm, dogs tugging on leashes. I leaned on the railing, steam rising into the crisp air, and for the first time in decades, I felt the calm of a man who owed no one an explanation. I thought of Maggie again. "I'm free now," I whispered. "I can live, not just survive." Meanwhile, the world closed in on David and Melissa. When the news of my revised estate leaked, charitable trusts have a way of being noticed, their friends began to vanish. The dinner invitations stopped. The calls slowed. Whispers followed them in every room they entered. David had to sell his luxury SUV, the one I had paid for years ago, to cover mounting credit card bills. Melissa moved through circles that no longer saw her as glamorous but as desperate. They rented a modest condo in Queens, far from the skyline they once boasted about, and each month's rent was a reminder of what they had lost. I did not gloat. I did not call to ask how they were. Their downfall wasn't my revenge, it was the shadow of their own choices catching up. One evening my phone rang. It was David. His voice was thick, not with anger this time, but with something close to pleading. "Dad, I made mistakes. We both did. But you can't erase us. We're your blood." I let him speak, let him unravel every excuse and half-apology he had prepared. Then I answered slowly, so every word would leave no space for doubt. "You're my blood, yes, but family is more than blood. Family is respect, loyalty, and truth. You gave me none of that, and I don't need you in my life anymore." The silence on the line stretched until he finally hung up. That was the last time I heard his voice. Peace came in small rituals. Afternoons spent reading novels I never had time for. Mornings walking in the park. Evenings sitting by the window with a glass of tea instead of orange juice. I began attending community lectures at the library, where men and women my age gathered not to talk about money, but about history, art, and the joy of being alive. One man asked me to join his chess group. Another invited me to a volunteer event, tutoring young coders. I said yes to both. My circle grew not with family by blood, but with family by choice. And in their company I discovered something I thought had been stolen from me. Belonging? Still, there were nights when the old hurt pressed in. I would see a father and son walking down the street, their laughter cutting through the air, and a pang would find my ribs. That could have been us, I would think. Then I reminded myself, it wasn't me who destroyed that bond. It was them. Maggie's voice returned in those moments, as soft as when she used to sit beside me on long nights of work. "Ed, you did what was right. You gave everything. They chose otherwise. Let them live with it." Her voice steadied me. It reminded me that guilt is useless when truth is so clear. The lesson of all this was not simple, but it was sharp. Blood alone doesn't define family. Sacrifice does. Love does. Respect does. Without those, the word family is just letters. I thought of parents out there, still giving their last dime, still believing that gratitude will come later. And I wanted to tell them, set boundaries, protect yourself, don't confuse love with servitude. And to the children who might be listening, I wanted to say, don't mistake patience for weakness. One day, the well can run dry. As spring turned to summer, I stood in my new living room, sunlight flooding across the wood floor. I had planted a lily on the balcony, white and simple, the same flower I carried from the florist the day I began this fight. It bloomed slowly, each petal unfolding with quiet certainty. I looked at it and said aloud, I don't need them anymore. I have myself, and that is enough. The words didn't sting, they healed. I have no illusions that David or Melissa will change. People who try to poison their own father for money don't wake up different one morning. They will struggle. They will fight each other. They may call again someday, or they may not. Either way, my answer will remain the same. My life belongs to me now. My legacy belongs to those who will use it to heal, to build, to learn. And that is more than enough for one man's lifetime. I close this chapter with the clarity of a man who has walked through fire and come out whole. Betrayal cut me, but it did not kill me. Money tempted them, but it freed me. And now, as I sit here looking out at the park, I feel something I thought I had lost forever. Peace. And deep inside, I know Maggie would smile and whisper back, Yes, Ed, finally, you're free. The apartment I live in now is nothing like the penthouse I left behind. It isn't lined with marble or filled with designer furniture, but it is mine in a way that feels truer. 2 bedrooms, soft light through tall windows, and a balcony that opens onto the expanse of Central Park. The building is worth around $200,000, a fraction of what I once called home, but the peace it carries is priceless. I wake every morning to the sight of trees shifting in the breeze, children laughing on their way to school, and the rhythm of joggers pacing down the path. The city hums, but it no longer presses down on me like a weight. Here I breathe. Here I am free. I think back often to the night at Bella Vista, when the envelope slid across the table and David's face collapsed under the truth. That moment was the turning point, not just legally, but spiritually. It was the night I stopped being their victim and chose to be my own man again. The aftermath has been everything I hoped for. Harrison Tech's $45 million is secured in the Medical Foundation, already funding scholarships for young doctors and grants for hospitals. My name is on the charter, but more importantly, Maggie's memory is alive in every dollar sent to help someone fight for life. She always wanted me to build something that mattered beyond our walls. I finally did. David and Melissa, on the other hand, have crumbled under their own doing. Word travels fast in this city. Colleagues who once flocked to their parties now cross the street to avoid them. Their names are whispered with a mix of pity and disgust. I heard from Rick that they sold their house in desperation, scraping together just enough to cover debts. Melissa couldn't endure the fall from grace. She left David, and no one seems to know where she went. He sent me a letter not long ago. The handwriting was shaky, the words heavy with a mix of apology and anger. He begged for another chance, for forgiveness, for help. I placed the letter in a drawer without replying. I read it once, folded it carefully, and decided silence would be my answer. My peace does not need his words. My dignity does not need his presence. I told myself and meant it. I don't need their apology. I have my life. Life in this new chapter is not lonely, though some might assume it would be. I joined a group at the community center that teaches kids how to code. Every Saturday morning, I sit in front of rows of bright young faces and show them the same basics I once tried to share with David when he was a boy. He never cared, never listened. But these children, some of them from broken homes, some of them carrying more weight than a child should, they lean in with wonder. Their excitement reminds me of my own in that dusty garage decades ago. I see in them not what I lost with my son, but what I gained through resilience. After class, a girl named Maria once handed me a thank you card. On it, she had drawn a simple computer with the words, "You make me believe I can build something too." I held that card longer than I ever held David's apology letter. One was a lie drenched in guilt. The other was hope drawn with crayons. Walking through the park after class, I sometimes sit on a bench and watch the sunlight fall across the grass. It is there that I do most of my thinking. I think about parents who give everything, hoping for love in return, and I think about how dangerous it is to tie love to sacrifice without boundaries. That is the first lesson I carry now. As parents, we must give, but we must also protect ourselves. Love without respect is just exploitation. The second lesson is for children. Gratitude is not weakness, it is strength. Entitlement can destroy not just families, but lives. My son thought inheritance was a right, not a gift, and that lie led him to betray me. And finally, about the world itself. Money doesn't create character, it reveals it. When pressed, when tempted, people show you who they really are. The modern world is noisy with ambition and greed, but in that noise, truth always finds a way to speak. Sometimes I talk to Maggie still. At night, sitting by the window, I whisper as if she is on the couch beside me. "We did it, love. We made it through." I imagine her smile, her calm voice reminding me of the man I was when we were young. She always said I carried too much weight, that one day it would break me. But it didn't. It sharpened me. Losing her taught me grief. Losing my son taught me strength. I am not bitter. I am not broken. I am simply free. One unexpected thing happened last week. A neighbor, an elderly man named Charles, invited me to join his walking club. Just a small group of seniors who meet twice a week to circle the park, share stories, and drink coffee afterward. I said yes, and on our first walk, I felt a belonging I hadn't felt in years. We talked about books, about old movies, about our children and grandchildren. Not once did anyone ask me about Harrison Tech, or Millions, or Betrayal. They saw me, just me. And in that moment, I realized the deepest truth of all. Family isn't bound by blood, but by the choice to see and respect each other. I do not hate David. Hatred is just another chain. I simply no longer carry him. He is a man shaped by his own greed, left to face the consequences of his choices. If someday he truly changes, it will be his journey, not mine. My journey is forward. My life is forward. As I write this, I glance at the small wooden clock on my shelf. It once belonged to my father, its hands ticking faithfully through every decade of my life. It reminds me that time is the one inheritance we cannot squander. We can waste money, betray trust, or even lose family. But time is what tells us whether we learned or not. And I have learned. I have chosen peace. I have chosen dignity. And I know now more than ever that no betrayal can erase the worth of a man who chooses to stand tall. My story ends not in anger, but in freedom. Parents, protect your hearts as fiercely as you protect your assets. Children, never forget that love and respect are worth more than any inheritance. And to anyone listening, remember, in this modern world, wealth may be counted in dollars, but true worth is measured in character. I close this chapter with a truth that no betrayal can take away. Family is not who shares your blood. Family is the one who never puts poison in your glass. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.